In this video, I will show you how to implement biometric authentication in a Flutter application. And the best part is, it's very simple. So let's dive in. First, we need to install local auth plugin in our Flutter project. This plugin is maintained by Flutter team, which means it's reliable and it's regularly updated. Current version is 3.0.0. To install this plugin in our Flutter project, let's go to Installing tab, copy the package name and version number, go to Visual Studio Code and paste that under dependencies section like this. Hit save. Now here is where things get interesting. We are going to follow best practice by creating a separate authentication service. And why it's necessary? Because separating business logic from UI makes our code cleaner, testable and easier to maintain. So right click on the lib folder, select new folder and name it as services. And inside that folder, create a new file called auth_service.dart. Now, let's build our authentication service from scratch. First, let's import local auth package, which gives us access to all the biometric functionality. Next, let's create our class called auth service. Auth service is going to handle everything related to biometric authentication. And inside here, the first thing that we need is an instance of local authentication. So let's create that. Next, let's add the main method, which will be responsible for performing the actual authentication. And let's call this method as authenticate user. Right now, this is just a void method. It doesn't return anything, it doesn't do anything. We will make the necessary changes as we move forward. Inside this method, let's use local auth object and call authenticate method. This is the method that does all the heavy lifting. It shows the biometric prompt, scans fingerprint or face, and checks if it is a match. Localize reason is the required parameter for authenticate method, and it requires a string. So let's set the value as please authenticate to proceed. This is the message users see on the biometric prompt. Next, we will use important parameter of authenticate method called biometric only, and we will set its value to true. This means user must use their actual biometric. They can't fall back to typing their device pin. But here is the problem. We are calling the authenticate method which returns future boolean. But we are not doing anything with the result. Also, the authenticate is an asynchronous operation. It doesn't complete instantly. User needs time to scan their fingerprint or face. So calling it like this won't even work properly. Let's address both of these issues. First, to make this method asynchronous, let's add async keyword at the end of the method signature. Async keyword tells Dart that this method contains asynchronous operations, things that take time. And add the await keyword before the authenticate call. Await means pause here. Wait until this operation completes. And second, to capture the authentication result, let's create a boolean variable called is authenticated. True means success and false means failure. But there is still a problem. This method is a void method, which means we can't return this information to whoever called this method. So let's change the return type from void to future boolean and return the authentication result. Here, future boolean means this method will eventually return true or false, but you need to wait for it. This is better. We can now return the authentication result, but we are still missing something important. What about errors? What if user hasn't set up biometrics? What if they get locked out after too many attempts? What if they cancel? We need to handle all these cases and provide specific error messages. So for error handling, let's create a variable at the top of the method to store the authentication result like this and set its default value to false. And let's use that variable over here. Next, let's wrap our authenticate call in a try catch block like this. And here is what we are going to do. Instead of returning just a boolean, we are going to return two pieces of information from this method. First one, whether the authentication succeeded or not, and an error message if something went wrong. Dart 3 has a perfect feature for this called records. So let's change the return type from future boolean to future boolean and nullable string and update our code. Okay, let's talk about this return type. Future boolean nullable string. This might look weird at first, but it's actually really elegant. Let me break it down. Future we already know. This means we return something eventually. And boolean nullable string is a record. That's a bundle containing two pieces of information. First one is a boolean, true or false, whether the authentication succeeded or not. And second, nullable string means if there is an error, what's the message? So when the authentication succeeds, we return true and null, means success, no error message. And when it fails, we return false and some error message. Failure, here is why. But we can do even better. Different errors need different messages. So let's change the catch block to catch the local auth exception specifically. Local auth exception is thrown by local auth package when something goes wrong. This lets us handle biometric errors specifically. Now let's add a switch statement to handle different error codes. First case, the user hasn't set up biometrics at all. And there are two error codes, both mean the same thing. So I'm handling them together. And look at the return statement. It's a record. First value is false because the authentication failed. And second value explains why and tells them what to do. Second case, biometric lockout. And this happens when someone tries too many times with wrong fingerprint. The system logs them out for security. And our message explains what happened and what to do. Third case, user taps cancel. That's not really an error, but it's a choice. Our message is neutral and respectful. And finally, the default case catches any other errors we didn't specifically handle. Hit save. Our authentication service is now complete. And you understand exactly why we built this way, not just how. Now let's connect our authentication service with UI. Alright, I have already set up a basic UI for us to save time. We have a screen with login with biometrics button right in the center. So here is what we will do. First, when user taps the button, we will trigger biometric authentication. Second, while the authentication is in progress, we will show loading spinner inside the button. The button will be disabled during the authentication, so user can't tap it multiple times. And third, when the authentication completes, we will either navigate to the home screen on success or show an error message on failure. So let's build this step by step. First thing, we need to import our authentication service. This gives us access to the auth service we built earlier. Next, let's create an instance of our auth service inside the biometric login state class. Next, we need a way to track whether authentication is currently in progress. This is crucial because we want to show a different UI depending on this state. So let's add a boolean variable called is authenticating with default value as false. Now comes the important part, implementing the function that handles biometric authentication. This function will run every time user taps the login button. Here is the complete handle biometric auth function. Now let me break it down every line so you understand exactly what's happening. First, the return type, future void. This means this function will complete eventually but won't return anything. Next, the async keyword. It tells that this function contains asynchronous operation, things that take time. Next, we are setting our is authenticating flag to true. This means our authentication is now in progress. It allows us to show a loading spinner and user gets an instant visual feedback that something is happening. Next, we are using authentication service and calling the authenticate user to trigger the biometric authentication. And to get the result, we are using record destructuring. Okay, this line is really cool and it's using a modern Dart 3 feature that makes our code much cleaner. Let me break this down piece by piece. This is called record destructuring or pattern matching. Remember, from our auth service, we are returning a record. That's a package containing two values, boolean and a nullable string. So instead of storing this result in a single variable, we are unpacking the record directly into two separate named variables. Next, authentication is complete. Whether it succeeded or failed, we are done waiting. So we set the is authenticating flag back to false. Next, we are checking if the authentication is successful or not. And if it is successful, that means the fingerprint match or Face ID recognize the user. it's time to navigate the user into the app. And to navigate the user to the app, we are using navigator.pushReplacement method. And if we reach this else block, that means authentication failed. Could be wrong fingerprint, user cancelled, biometrics not set up, locked out, whatever the reason. We need to tell the user what went wrong. And for that purpose, we are using snack bar to display the error message, which will slide up from the bottom of the screen. Now let's connect our function with login with biometrics button. There are two key things happening with this button. First one, the onPress property. Here we are using ternary operator that says if is authenticating is true, set onPress to null, which disables the button. Otherwise, use handle biometric auth function. This is crucial because we don't want users clicking the button multiple times. And second, the child property. Here also we are using ternary operator, which says if is authenticating, then show a circular progress indicator. Otherwise, show a normal text, login with biometrics. Alright, our coding part is done, but we need to configure the platforms. Android first. There are two changes that we need to make in the Android project. First, let's go to Android folder, app, src, main, and open up the android manifest.xml file. This file tells Android what permissions our app needs. Here we need to add the biometric permission and make sure you are adding it before the application tag. This tells Android our app needs biometric access. Hit save. Second, go to the Kotlin folder and open up main.activity.kt file. And instead of using Flutter activity, here we will use Flutter fragment activity. And let's change the input accordingly. Hit save. Android configuration is now complete. Let's go to iOS folder, runner, and open up info.plist. Info.plist tells iOS what features we use and why. Paste this key value pair inside the info.plist file and hit save. Perfect. Both platforms configured. Time to test. Alright, I have connected my Android device to my Mac machine using the USB cable with USB debugging enabled. So let's deploy the app. Okay, the application has been deployed on my Android device. Now let me tap on the login with biometrics button and immediately the biometric prompt shows up. And behind that biometric prompt, we are seeing the loading spinner that we have added. Also, the login with biometrics button is disabled. And we are also seeing the message that we have added, please authenticate to proceed. Now let me add my fingerprint. It's validated and now we are in the application. Let me log out. Let me tap on the login with biometrics button again. Let me try a different fingerprint. And we are getting the message fingerprint not recognized. And if I tap on the cancel button, we are seeing the message that we have added, authentication cancelled by user. Perfect. Everything is working as we have expected on our Android device. Now it's time to test this on iOS. Let's see how Face ID works. Now, before we continue, I need to tell you something very important. Getting your Flutter app onto a real iPhone involves few different steps. I have already created a detailed video on exactly how to get your Flutter app running on an actual iPhone using your free Apple ID. So, I will drop a link to that video in the description below and cards above. So, pause this video and watch that video first. Okay, assuming you have watched that video and successfully deployed your app on your iPhone, let's continue. Okay, I have already deployed the Flutter application on my iPhone. Now let's tap on the login with biometrics button. And here we are getting a pop-up. Do you want to allow Flutter biometric auth to use Face ID? And notice we are also seeing the message that we have added in the info.plist. Login using Face ID. Now let's tap on allow. And the Face ID is successfully validated. We are in the application. Perfect. Biometric authentication is perfectly working on both Android and iOS. Before we wrap up, let me share some tips that will further improve our biometric authentication. First one, provide a fallback. In our example, we are currently using biometric only to true. But if you want to allow user to use passcode, set biometric only to false, which will allow user to use their device PIN to authenticate if biometric authentication fails. Second, check device support. To check whether the device supports biometric authentication or not, you can use can check biometrics method on local auth object. And third, check what's available. You can get the list of enrolled biometrics using the get available biometrics method on local auth object. Alright, all the code from this tutorial is available on GitHub, link in the description below. Thank you for watching this tutorial and I will see you in the next one. Happy coding!